coming to terms with the idea that the universe is on purpose can be difficult when you hear sirens wailing, or you turn on the television and watch the news, or you check your email. The first thing that pops up is the headlines from the newspaper. So being creative, which is our theme for June, isn't about coercing or forcing something to happen. It's about getting a greater realization of that good that is behind everything and everyone. So one of the most difficult tasks we face as creative beings is a primal one, or following our gut instincts, which is the tribal way, which is the talk title this morning. We are always immersed in the creative flow of the divine. Becoming conscious of that connection is about living in the now moment. Just under the surface of our conscious mind, in the subjective field, everything already exists as potential. So the question becomes, how do we access that possibility? Well, we start by asking, what's next? Instead of asking, why me? So we get out of that victim consciousness. We stop trying to think our way through it. And we begin to listen to that still small voice within each of us. Even the obstacles that we face along the journey often become the gateway to a greater success. Creativity happens naturally if and only if we learn to trust in the process. We begin by enhancing our ability to follow our gut instincts, exercising the mind as the muscle it is to accomplish the mission of our soul. Dr. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of the Science of Mind, tells us that to be conscious is to create, because spirit has to be conscious and therefore must have something of which to be conscious. So because spirit has to be conscious, it has to create. And it does that by means of each of us. So creation doesn't mean making something out of nothing. It is the passing of spiritual substance into manifest form. So creation is really God making something out of itself by becoming the thing it creates. And it does this through us. Once we accept that it's natural to create, we move into a greater awareness and we begin to attract greater possibilities. Have you ever noticed that a parent can find their child in a room of screaming children? It's the same thing for us. We have to learn to become the parent to the creative ideas that are percolating within us. And if we feel like we're swimming upstream, imagine that the stream is just there to move you in the current to a different location. When we get in alignment with the higher power, we vibrate at a higher harmonic frequency. And then the Great Spirit begins to show itself to us more predominantly through this magical thing called synchronicity. Any of you experience that? So when we lose sight of the creative power within us, it's important to acknowledge the loss and to share it. This is what our inreach and our outreach is all about. Our ecclesiastical team is here to hold the high watch for you. Our spiritual family is here to love and support you through your ouches as well as your achievements. Diana Yawahu, who is the author of Voices of Our Ancestors and one of my guides, says that those who practice and pray together become relatives of the one mind. So creativity isn't something that just a small chosen few can have. It's a spiritual force. It's a gift that we have been given as human beings. And we access it through the power of the mind. How many of you are familiar with The Artist's Way, written by Julia Cameron? She says that there are two methods to bring that creative artist within us forth. And one of them is the morning pages. And the morning pages are kind of like journaling, except that you make a commitment to do it on a daily basis. And it gives you the opportunity to write down your likes, your dislikes, your fears, your failures, and the things that you want to achieve. Once it's on paper, then the creative blocks are released, and you can move into your day with new purpose. And the other is the artist dates. And that's about setting aside a time for you, a time to honor that creative force within you, a place where you can create an environment that feels safe for you to perhaps draw a picture or paint a sunrise. It's about giving yourself permission to take an unknown journey. I received a text message last Wednesday, that our president was going to, and the president of the center, not the country, was going to Kansas, where she's from, to place flowers on the Mormon, I'll say that easily for you, Fawn, on the Mormon headstone, which has been a family tradition for years. And she was planning to leave on Friday and come back on Monday, and it's a 12-hour journey each way. So the first thing that popped into my head was, she shouldn't be doing this alone. So I texted back and said, will you be with family? And the answer came back, no. So I said, well, do you want company? It happened to be that I was off last weekend. So she said yes. And so I felt called to support her in that endeavor, because her mother and my mother both passed recently, so we're kind of simpatico in spirit. And so then the story began that I wasn't going to Kansas unless I got to meet Dorothy. So we traveled along, and it came to the last day where it was time to actually go and visit the house where Dorothy grew up. And I know some of you have been there. So the evening before, Jane said to me, well, I looked it up online and they're closed on Monday. And I said, no, I don't want to hear that. So we get in the car the next morning and we go. And we take pictures of the statue of Dorothy with the little basket and Toto in it, and the lion and the scarecrow and the Tin Man. And I got to skip along the yellow brick road and slide down the slide and swing on the swing, and still there was no Dorothy. So we got in the car to leave, and we're driving in front of her house, and the door opens, and out steps Dorothy with her broom, and she's sweeping the front porch. So maybe this is a silly story, but maybe it's really powerful. If you're true to your principle and you stand in the truth of who you are as a spiritual being, and you ignore the conditions with complete conviction, Dr. Holmes tells us, you will see the false position yielded without another struggle. So the divine creative power within you doesn't know zeros. It doesn't know anything except to give. And it does that by means of you. So along the journey, while we were at the Mormon at the cemetery putting the flowers on the Mormon headstone, we saw a magpie. And magpies, it turns out, are the state bird for Colorado, and we had also seen one at the Garden of the Gods. And depending on how many you see, they're either lucky or unlucky. And that has to do with the story about Noah's Ark, that the magpie was the only animal that refused to fly in to the ark. He wanted to perch on the outside. So if the magpie perches on the roof of your house, because they build their nests out of mud and twigs and they're really strong, that means that your house will never fall down. And this is what the Science of Mind teaching is for me. It's the house that never falls down. They also build their nests in the fork of trees, which are intersections between worlds. So the magpie warns us to be careful thinking and acting as if metaphysics can do more for us than it can. And this for me is about the law always works, especially when it works by appearing not to work. So there is a participatory part in this. We have to treat and move our feet, which means we have to pray and then take the action that makes it possible. Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way says that the spirit of service yields us our dharma, that right path we dream of following in our best and most fulfilled moments of faith. So creation always was, and it always will be. Because we have been given the power to choose, we are at the center of that divine activity. The challenge? The creative power can only recognize us when we recognize it. So this is about learning to see things as they really are, not as they appear to be. Getting a clear concept, keeping everything else out of our thinking. And this is what our 7-step spiritual mind treatment is about. When you just say no and you deny the denial, and you reaffirm the truth over and over and over and over again. And if you need help, pick up the phone, go online and make a prayer request or drop one in the treasure chest. It's up to us to let that divine spark speak through us. It's like the radio waves are broadcasting all the time, but we have to tune the radio in to the channel that we want to listen to. Not always easy, but it's important to keep flexing your spiritual muscle. When we find the good or the God and we accept it, the universe automatically aligns in support of our dreams. When we imagine the worst possible scenario, the universe lines up and supports that dream, better known as a nightmare. Dhyana Yawahu also says that just as the seed follows sacred laws to grow, so it is with the sacred fire of a clear mind. So this is the last part of the weekend to share. Until next week. We weren't even 2 hours outside of Albuquerque. And here I am thinking that I'm on this journey to support our president. And she says, we're going to make a pit stop at the Arm & Hammer United World College of American West. Anybody know anything about that? Well, they have this incredible place there called the Dawn Light Sanctuary. And many of you know that I served in North Carolina before I came here. I founded my own work there called the Foothills Center for Spiritual Living. And while I was in service, I spent 4 or 5 years at the Light Center. That's where the 2 CDs with the crystal bowls were recorded. And they have there what's called the light chamber. And in this light chamber, they spent thousands of dollars to simulate the journey through the chakras with colored lights that go from red to orange to yellow to green to blue to purple to violet. And Jane was telling me about these prisms, and I didn't quite understand really what that was about, but I was like, okay, it's a road trip, let's go. And when we got there were rainbows all over the place. There were prisms on the ceiling of this structure that was shining in this incredible light. And I got to sit down and experience what I've experienced at the Light Center over and over again from artificial lights from the sun. And I got to feel the energy of those colors moving through my entire body. And it was just absolutely magical and a wonderful healing experience. So sometimes when we least expect it, a new possibility opens for us. Maybe you'll be touched by the story that Jane shared this morning during our community sharing. Maybe that'll inspire you to get in touch with the power of your creativity. And as I mentioned before, we also saw 2 magpies. And when you see 2, that represents merriment. And we did have a lot of laughs on the journey. And it also represents marriage. And since I've checked in with my guides, and they tell me that my next relationship is just going to be a lover, I'm giving that one to Jane. So recognizing that what is happening is simply happening to us, as it is. Understanding that our thinking is in relationship to it, that it is calling forth whatever the experience is, whatever the emotion feels like, for our own conscious evolution. I am on this particular path because I chose to be. The material things, my animal guides, the people around me reflect back at me what I have entertained in my thinking. To be alive at this time and in this particular place with that sacred knowledge is an opportunity to create something amazing. So I encourage you to sit in your own prism of the rainbow light, to bring it into your body from the stars above, to connect with the crystalline core of Mother Earth, to reach up and connect with the crystalline core of Father Sun, to embody the tribal way. Follow your instincts so that they can lead you to a higher awareness of your intuition. And that inevitably will bring you into a greater conscious awareness of your connection to the Great Spirit. Thank you, and namaste.